We all know the old saying, don't we? Can't take it with you. And if you remember last week's sermon, that's kind of what the parable of the rich fool is about. He wasn't a fool, right, because he was wealthy. He was a fool because he mistook his wealth for his identity. He relied so much on his wealth for his comfort, his stability, his safety. He basically forgot about God. And although it may seem that today's parable about the rich man and Lazarus is about wealth, it's only partially true. I think the heart of the story is really about distance. There's a gate, there's a table, and on one side of that gate there is a man who feasts sumptuously every day. And on the other side of that gate there is a hungry beggar, covered in sores that the dogs lick, lying just outside the gate. And later, we find out that a great chasm has been fixed between them. And the question that I hear echoing through this story is fairly simple, but I think it's rather piercing at the same time. Who built that gate? Who dug that chasm that was fixed between them? But to really hear the story, I think we have to remember what kind of storyteller Luke is. Gospel writer Luke loves reversals. You see it throughout his entire gospel. He sees the world through the lens of God's great turning, where those on the margins are brought to the center. Those who imagine themselves secure are shaken awake. We hear it first in the very first chapters of Luke in Mary's Magnificat. Remember, she sings, "He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly." Reversal. He's filled the hungry with good things, sent the rich away empty. Reversal. That's not just good poetry, by the way. That's prophecy. And it really is at the heartbeat of Luke's gospel, God's great reversal of the world's values. And then we hear it again in the Sermon on the Plain, where Jesus says, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." And then he adds, "Woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation." Over and over again throughout his gospel, Luke shows us this pattern, this divine inversion, where the first are last, the hungry are filled, the forgotten are remembered, the unseen are named and known. And here in this story of the rich man and Lazarus, that great reversal takes on a dramatic and eternal form. Jesus paints two worlds. It's fairly simple, really. In the first world, the rich man has everything. He's got clothes, he's got banquets, he's got comfort, he's got luxury. And Lazarus has nothing. He's only got his sores, he's only got his hunger. He's only got hope for crumbs that fall from that rich man's table. And then in the second world, everything flips on its head, right? It's Lazarus who is being comforted in the embrace of Father Abraham, and the rich man is in Hades crying out for mercy that does not come. The reverse is total. But it's not about punishment. Don't think of it that way, friends. It's not about the punishment. It's about the revelation, because the story is revealing what has been true for the rich man all along. The world that he has built for himself, a world of separation and gates and willful blindness, has in the end become his eternal reality. And here's something that's important to note, I think. The rich man is never actively cruel towards Lazarus. He doesn't stand at his gate and berate him with abuse and insults. He doesn't beat him or hit him. He simply doesn't see him. And that is the real tragedy of this story. The sin here, the mistake, is not active hatred. It's comfortable indifference. And if we're not careful, that can be the sin of the modern church we serve. We're polite, right? Of course we're polite people. And we're decent people, right? Of course we are. And we strive to be kind and loving and all of that wonderful stuff. But often we're also blind, willfully or not. We are blind sometimes to the suffering at our gates, to the systems that keep people outside our gates, blind to the very Lazarus in our midst. The parable isn't really about the afterlife, friends. That's not the point. I strongly encourage you not to think of it like that. Don't try to come up with what the afterlife might be based on this story. No. This teaching, the heart of it, is about distance because it's about the life we're living right now and the distance we put between one and the other. It's about how our daily choices really do shape our souls and our society. That chasm that Abraham describes, the one that cannot be crossed, didn't appear by magic. It was dug stone by stone, shovelful by shovelful, by choices. The rich man's choice to look away, to keep walking, to build bigger gates, to excuse injustice by saying, that's just the way things are. The rich man spent his life not seeing Lazarus, and in the end, like that rich fool, he couldn't see God either. Because indifference practiced long enough becomes a prison. And compassion practiced daily becomes our freedom to act, our freedom to help, our freedom to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with God. Because Lazarus is still at the gate, friends. He hadn't gone anywhere. We all know what he looks like. He's the homeless person freezing on the square right now. He's the refugee at our border. He's the immigrant in our community. He's the child living in a food desert without health care. And the Gospel of Luke is adamant. It will not let us spiritualize that away. It will not let us pretend that faith and justice are somehow two separate things. God's kingdom is not an escape from this world. That's wrong thinking. God's kingdom is the transformation of this world. And that transformation begins when we start seeing the people at our gates and stop stepping over them. When the rich man begs Abraham to send Lazarus back from the dead to warn his brothers, what does Abraham say? They have Moses and the prophets. What more do they need? Let them listen to them. And it's true, the prophets had told us again and again, and I'm going to say it again and again. What does the Lord require of us? To do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Because the fact of the matter is that faith that does not act is no faith at all. At best, it's avoidance masquerading as religion. And the story does end with a chasm fixed between Lazarus and the rich man that neither one of them can cross. But here's the good news. That chasm is not the last word. Because in Jesus Christ, God has already crossed it. The one who was poor, who was rich, rather, became poor for our sake. The one who was whole took on our wounds. The one who sat at the banquet table in the kingdom of heaven got up, went outside his gate, sat down with Lazarus, healed his wounds, and kept him warm with his purple linen cloak. That's who God is. And that's what love does. What we do in this life matters, friends. Matters very, very deeply. Not because it earns us a place in heaven, but because it shapes the kind of world we are building with God. A world where gates become tables, where there's room enough for all. A world where perfect strangers become intimate siblings because love. A world, friends, where Lazarus is seen, known, and called by name. Beloved. May it be so for you, friends. May it be so for me.